Good morning, folks. I have to say this really quickly. We have a lot going on. We are sorry for the moderate delays. Again, I don't like doing that. I really do like being on time, but unfortunately, we've had some things that we had to work through, and I apologize for that. A couple of things I want to just bring up that we're talking about that are going to be important for today. We are going to talk about the issues going on with the North. Yes, we are talking about Lebanon. We are going to talk about the pagers that just went off. We got a whole new definition to pagers going off.
Bing, bing.
Yeah, you ever heard about a pager going off and causing a disturbance in the crowd?
Oh, yeah.
Well, this
is going to be good.
This is going to give a whole new definition to disturbance in a crowd with pagers. We're going to talk about that. We are also going... Brad is wondering if there's a shortage of pagers. Yes, there is. And the other thing that we are going to talk about is we are going to talk about the rapidly changing geopolitics of the region as it relates to the Southern Peninsula, as it relates to the world's attitude on Iran, what's happening next for Israel. There's a lot that's going on. Israel is attacked yet again by Yemen. That's another one.
From the south.
From the south. And this one really bothers me because this one involved a long-range missile that if I understand things correctly, Israel, for whatever reason, was not able to stop it.
Yes and no. We'll get into that.
We'll talk about that. That really, it bothers me for a lot of reasons. I think that has something to do with some complicit action by the United States, which is a whole other, I do believe that's the case. I do believe that's the case. Because Israel, well, we'll talk about the technology and maybe you could confirm this for me, but just some things that I know, I think I think that we're in worse shape than we're thinking in terms of being a country that is not supporting as we should. And it's really, 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 really bad. Look, we're bringing judgment upon ourselves as a nation because the attitude that we're having towards Israel, and it's going to backfire on us. It's going to backfire in ways that we never thought possible. And
it is backfiring.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely it is. Absolutely. So I want to talk about all of that. And then just very, very quickly, I do want to bring up the super chats and the super stickers that have come up. I think we only just have a few, but I want to point those out and just tell you guys thank you. By the way, when you do this on both platforms, when you do this on Rumble and when you do this on YouTube, it is a tremendous help to us. And of course, we are very, very thankful for that help. And we just thank you guys for your involvement in doing that. It goes a long way. The three that we have, I think today we only have three so far. They're all Brad's. And Brad's going to get me in trouble when I read these things. I'm going to just tell you this right now. Kamala's in Wisconsin to win over swing votes this week, while Flashbang will visit with those which put him over the top in 2020 in Arlington. Wow. That's a tough one, Brad. That's a harsh one, but it is true. Media reporting the cause for the second attempt on President Trump was due to comments about Haitians. This is crazy how they're blaming Trump. It's crazy. He says this can't be true, as the shooter has never been spotted eating a cat. I mean, you got to appreciate Brad's humor in this. He's a crack up, but it's crazy actually.
Okay, so the whole idea of blaming the victim is one of the devil's more, how do you say, insidious weapons.
Oh yeah, no, it's actually been yes, absolutely.
I mean, in a nutshell, that's what's being done to Israel.
Yep.
I mean, boom! Look at how they've turned this upside down. Remember, after 7th of October, I said, "Give us a week."
Yeah,
and they're going to be turning on us.
Oh yeah.
I mean, give President Trump 3 days, and they're going to be turning on him. And again, whatever happens, then you're to blame.
Yeah. And this is, by the way, a common technique that you can trace all the way to the book of Genesis.
Yeah,
it's a tactic of the enemy, and we know that tactic is very real, and it's ugly, and we should identify it for what it is, and that is satanic. Let me read one more comment. This is from Diggy L 777. Oh, that's Pookie. Pookie, what's up, man? Pookie says Hezbollah is being exposed as weak thugs. It is time for Bibi and Israel to hit hard now and show Iran that they are not playing games. Operation Circumcised. I like that one. But look, here's the problem right now that's happening with that. See, I think that we should have hit Iran very, very hard, very quickly a long time ago. And I think that we would have been a lot better off doing it because the international tolerance for that, as bad as it may have been, would have been said and done. It would have been over. It would have been a finished wrap. But no matter how you cut it, I think Israel was going to get the blunt of it.
Oh, we get to we're on the blunt edge of this, and things are happening. So where do we want to start?
Let's talk about the North.
Okay.
Or should we talk about the pagers? Well, we have to talk about the missile attack.
The pagers and the North are together.
But
The missile attack started off before. That happened, 4 days ago?
4 days ago. But wait, you know what? Let's talk about the North first, and then we'll get into the missile attack, because the missile attack will lead us into a whole path of other conversations.
Okay, so do we know what happened?
With what? With respect to
What happened
pagers?
in the North, yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let everybody know what's going on with that whole situation.
Okay, so there is
And tell me what I've been wanting to hear.
There's a Mossad agent that has been embedded in Lebanon for a long time. His name was Eli Beeper.
Oh my goodness!
You know they were all beepers.
He was brothers of helicopter, helicopter, Helio beeper and helicopter.
So,
Oh, I'm dying.
No, I'm not-
I'm sorry.
I told you you'd like that one.
Oh,
So here is what happened. And because the Hezbollah is a terrorist organization that can't use regular communications, they weren't using cell phones. Israel was using their cell phones against them for a long time. And Nasrallah is very famous about getting angry at everybody who uses a cell phone, blah, blah, blah. So their solution was to use, what do you call them?
pagers.
Pagers.
Yeah, they're
beepers.
pagers. They are. They're
They're
pagers.
little handheld pagers. The idea is that pagers receive information but don't transmit information.
Yeah, that's what pagers do. That's right.
The idea. So you can't track a pager. You can only, and that way they would send, coded information or to the pagers, and that's how the Hezbollah had information. And they actually bought a new set of pagers a little while ago and had them handed out to everybody they thought was important, including the family members of Hezbollah operatives, including Nasrallah himself, including the Iranian ambassador in Lebanon. He had one of these pagers. And somehow, somewhere, somewhy, we're calling him Avi Beeper.
Oh, it's not Eli Beeper. It's
not
Avi
Eli Beeper. It's Avi Beeper. Somebody managed to hack into the cell system and to the beeper systems, and at a certain point, all 3,500 of them exploded simultaneously. And by the way, not only in Lebanon, in Damascus, on the Golan Heights, all the Hezbollah operatives who had these beeper pagers on them, the batteries overheated and they exploded. And according to the numbers that I've heard, there's something like 3,000 Hezbollah operatives wounded. There's something like probably about 25 actual casualties. But they're talking about the amount of critical wounded in the hundreds, if not more. Operatives, sons of Hezbollah representatives in the Lebanese parliament have been killed. And the big question is what's happening with Hassan Nasrallah?
Yeah.
Because theoretically he had one of these beepers. Theoretically, it did explode in the bunker wherever he is. And theoretically, we haven't heard. They've actually put out a post that says he was not hurt, but we've yet to see him.
We have to see him to know that.
That's the case. And this is the long arm of Israel's technology. I don't know if it was Israel. Nobody said it's Israel.
Yeah,
We're not sure. I mean, don't tell anybody I said it was Israel. Let's make this clear. Okay.
Just ask Avi Kopter. That wasn't Israel either.
Eli Biper.
Avi Kopter. Heliocopter. Oh, man.
Okay, but they're okay. So that is what happened, and the Hezbollah is probably totally appalled. And by the way, they're making a lot of jokes about it all over the Arab world now. Again, I mean, Hassan Nasrallah is having a hard time. This is going to be another one against him. But joke aside, that puts the Hezbollah on its back foot. And a lot of people were thinking maybe that is the opening shot of the oncoming war between Israel and the Hezbollah that everybody is talking about. As of this moment, and I've been watching my phone closely, we don't have anything, but I do know that units have been moved up towards the border in the last couple of hours.
Wow. Okay. Just for clarity's sake, what we saw with these pagers was not an explosive that was planted in the in the pager itself. This was them using radio waves to actually get that battery to where it overheated and then eventually exploded.
Well,
correct?
Lithium batteries tend to explode when they overheat.
Yep,
I mean,
that's right.
We've heard about it in Tesla cars.
Right.
We've heard about it in others. So there's a little lithium battery on there.
Yeah.
You got a lithium battery in here.
Yep.
But there are very sophisticated softwares in the phone or in the object to make sure that the lithium battery doesn't overheat. It means when it gets too hot, your phone will shut off.
That's right.
But if you can hack into the software and cause, let's say, a full transmission to go out, the battery starts to heat, and then you overcome the safeguards that turn off the machine if the battery does overheat, and you keep on going long enough, you can overload the battery, and as a result of that, more than 3,000 batteries exploded simultaneously. And going by the pictures that they're showing from the hospitals in Beirut, a lot of head injuries, meaning somebody sent a message that they picked up the
pager,
and then
boom,
and then the explosion.
I don't know why I'm laughing at that. Barjan actually says the pager thing, it should be called Operation No 72 Virgins. Oh, look at this. Waiting on the Lord says, thank you, by the way, for your support. McDonald's is coming out with new burgers in support of Haiti. The Dog Mac, oh my goodness, and the Cat Mac. If you get a dog or cat Mac attack, then go to McDonald's in Ohio. These people, where do these people get these from?
Well, sometimes, and again, what I'm always finding very, very that this is something that's never been done before, ever, anywhere.
Yeah, look,
this is. I mean, Israel hasn't taken responsibility, but the world is asking itself, who else besides Israel could have pulled this off?
Yeah, I'm going to say this right now. I think that it is a brilliant tactic that is made, that is actually done. I think that it is remarkable. I know that there are some people that are in the audience that are busting our chops because they're saying it's not funny. But let me just explain something to you when you talk about it not being funny. Let me talk to you about the brevity of the loss of life that has been incurred as a result of hardcore terrorists that hate God, hate the people of God, and actually hate you. They hate you. You people that are defending it, you people that are actually saying, and I'm not talking about the people in our audience, but I'm talking about these people that are, in the colleges going, free Palestine. These people, they hate these people. So the reality of it is, if you are sitting in the middle of a situation where this type of thing is commonplace, then you're going to end up finding humor, as morbid as it may be, in some of this situation. That is not going to be understood by some people, and I can actually understand that. It makes sense to me why that's understood, why that's not understood by people. But you also have to understand the fact that when you stop for a moment to examine the brevity of the matters that are in front of us, I think that it is a long overdue thing that things like this are happening in response to the actions that are taken against the Israeli people.
Let me step in and talk a little bit about what this was and what this means and how this is different. Hezbollah has declared war on Israel. Let's make it clear. That means the Hezbollah is the enemy. Hezbollah has fired thousands of rockets at Israel, targeting civilian population. Let's make this clear. Which means from a, rules of engagement, rules of war, every Hezbollah operative is basically a legitimate military target. So far, so good?
Yeah.
We're clear on that one. The problem is that usually we have a problem hitting the targets because we don't know where they are. And we have another problem hitting the targets because they embed themselves inside civilian population. That's where right. You have to take into consideration that anytime you hit a target like that, you might be hitting non-combatants. And I'm not going to say innocent people, because whoever lives next door to a Hezbollah operative, and maybe we can talk about some of the polls that came out of Gaza about separating between the Palestinian people and Hamas. There's not really any separation, okay? But anytime somebody lives inside a Hezbollah area, they are accepting that this is unacceptable. These are my army. This is my army. Like if I live next to an army base in Israel and the enemy attacks the army base, I know that I might be part of the collateral damage. I've accepted that.
Yep.
Now, the problem is that Israel has always had a problem of hitting the enemy operatives, hitting the enemy soldiers, and finding them and hitting them. And here's a genius way to find them, because anybody by definition that has one of these pagers is by definition a Hezbollah soldier, and hitting them without causing any collateral damage, meaning hold up that pager to your head and then it goes off. This is as much a surgical strike as the world has ever seen, and Israel put millions of dollars, millions of ability, all of its capability into doing exactly what we are being charged with not doing.
Yeah.
And this is the most moral military strike back that you've ever seen in the world.
Well, and I want to add to this, because I'll keep laughing over it. And the reason why I'll keep laughing over it is because there are some people that say, well, my kids play with my electronic equipment every now and again. And isn't that a funny thing? You think that's a funny thing? Okay, let me explain something. First of all, my kids are not allowed to play with our electronics, okay? There's consequences if they even look over my shoulder at my phone. There's no screen time allowed for them. They're not allowed to play with it, number one. Number two, you are a terrible father and you're a terrible mother if you bring your kids into terrorist activity. So you know what? If Israel ends up doing what they do and kids die as a result of it, it's because you, as a terrible father, a terrible, terrible, demonically inspired father, brought your children into death. You did it, not Israel. So quite frankly, yeah, I'll laugh again and again and again when Ali Pager comes around and does what he does. They had it coming. And you know what? Praise God for technology like this. Praise God for the Israelis who continue to use the most moral tools that are out there.
That's what I'm trying to say. This is as much as a surgical strike at the enemy as you can get. I mean, you can't get more morally precise than this. I mean, it's hitting everybody in a way that does not jeopardize collateral damage, other people around in a minimal way. So again, I think whoever pulled this off, I don't know who it was, is an amazing
God bless Israel.
amazing strike. And again, this shows the difference between firing a high explosive rocket from one side of the world into a civilian population, not knowing where it's going to hit, not knowing who's going to be the target, then a precision target event that takes out only the people that are recognizable as the enemy.
No, it's a brilliant idea. And what I love about that even more, what I love about what Israel did even more, is it goes in the same line as Haniyah. It goes in the same line as all of these other Yahoos. It's like the long-reaching arm of Israel isn't going to quit. And I think every single time something like this happens, you go after another leader. You go after another operative. You just literally, and I think they should aim for the leaders first.
Well, here's another thing that kind of ties into this. Okay, we've hit the communication center, meaning we're hit the communication options, meaning from now on they won't be able to use either cell phones or pagers. So they're back to line telephones and Pony
Express. Perfect.
And Pony Express. I mean, that is a legitimate military target. I mean, that again, I have to say, whoever put this together and pulled this off,
amazing. It's brilliant.
Amazing.
I think it's brilliant.
I don't know who did it, but amazing.
And I think it's awesome. I laugh at it. And I'll tell you why I laugh at it. Because every tool that you take to use against the people of God literally explodes in your face. Could it be any better than that? I'm sorry. I think it's absolutely great. I think it's wonderful. And I'm not somebody who is looking for death. It's not any. This is not me. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is Israel has the right to defend itself.
The obligation, not the right, even the obligation.
The obligation, absolutely. Thank you for the correction. I receive
that.
The
Israeli government
has the obligation.
Amen. To defend its civilians.
Amen.
And by putting this crosshairs on the enemy soldiers, which is basically what was done. That is this. And two more things that are connected to this. First of all, watch what's going on right now. There has been a lot of talk during the last couple of weeks about Israel not being able to continue with the Hezbollah like we are because they have actually ethnically cleansed or made us move a large amount of the population out from the north. They're firing rockets, and the rocket fire has gotten further and further down. They're firing rockets all the way down to the Sea of Galilee. If you look up on the map, you're going to see what I'm talking about. So Israel is more and more getting close to, yes, we are going to need to get in, and maybe that's something we can talk about, what that will look like, how that happened, because I think, as opposed to most of the people that you've ever talked to, I have been in southern Lebanon on a tank. I know what it is. So we can go into how that's going to happen and what needs to happen.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is this might be the opening shot of a larger operation.
Oh, good.
That Israel, I believe, should be taking and should have taken already before. So keep your eyes on what's going on right now, and keep Israel, northern Israel, and basically a lot of the soldiers that have been moved up to the line, up to the fighting line, keep those soldiers in your prayers and in your hearts, and including some people that are very close to me too.
I wonder what in the world Yahya Sinwar is thinking right now. What has to be going through his mind? He has to be walking in complete fear.
Well, he's got a whole trash can full of pagers in his bomb shelter.
I think that's awesome.
But maybe in connection with what you're talking about, we celebrate the Exodus on a Passover Seder. Jews do all over the world, which is basically a meal, a dinner, a supper that the Last Supper actually was in itself. And we celebrate the fact that God saved us from our enemies.
Yep.
And God opened the Red Sea and let us pass through on dry land. And when the Pharaoh's soldiers, the enemy, was in the Red Sea, closed the Red Sea and drowned. And one of the famous things that we have a debate about at every Passover Seder is that a lot of us were expressing joy. You know, I mean, if you saw that happen, you'd be standing on the beach jumping up and down. watching your enemy being destroyed. It is a near-death experience, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you. I've had 2 near-death experiences in my life. And when I mean a near-death experience, it's a place where you are sure you're going to die. You've given up on life. You've accepted your death. And for reasons... miraculously, you did not die. One was in Lebanon for me, in southern Lebanon, when a Syrian tank fired 2 rounds at me and missed. Hallelujah. Another was a traffic accident that I had on Highway number 2 on the way back from Haifa one night when I hit a car in a chain accident.
Yeah.
I was number 10 of 12, and I was sure I was going to die. I mean, I've accepted my death. I accepted that my children would be orphans, and I actually saw the airbags open up. I mean, I don't know if you know, but in these kind of situations,
things slow down.
Time does slow down. So I actually saw the airbags kind of, and then I lost consciousness, and I survived. And one of the first things when I survived, when I woke up, was, wait a minute, I can think, I can move my hands, I can move my legs.
Did you wake up in the car? Did you wake up in the hospital?
I woke up in the car, literally
That's
in the car.
Crazy, man.
And I'm going, wait a minute, I'm alive. And I started laughing hysterically.
Yeah.
I sat there, I laid there next to the side of the car for probably about an hour because of all of the wounded. I was the least wounded. I just broke my collarbone. But I was laughing hysterically at the fact that I'm alive.
Yep.
And what I'm trying to say is this. Near-death experiences remind us of the beauty and the blessing of life that God has given us.
Amen.
So,
Amen.
So, Hezbollah is an enemy. Hezbollah, in many ways, is a near-death experience for us. What happened there, us being saved from them for another time, is, in my mind, a blessing.
Well, and I want to add this for a second. Hezbollah, Hamas, all of these terrorist organizations, they are part of a culture of death.
No.
This is they say that. They actually fault Israel for being part of a culture of life. This is a very important aspect to be considering.
Ismail Haniyeh once said that the Hamas loves death more than the enemy loves life.
Okay, I have to make an announcement on this, okay? And Brad, I'm sorry to do it, but I'm actually going to delete that channel or delete that comment. Dale, if you can actually do that, please, because those comments are going to get us in big trouble, number one. Number two, the one thing that I Dale, if you can do that, please, ASAP. The one thing that we have to keep in mind here is that I cannot stand everything that Ilhan Omar stands for. I can't. I cannot stand what Kamala Harris stands for. I think that they're brutally evil people. But it would be a disaster, a literal disaster in this country if any of our political leaders are assassinated. We can never, under any circumstance, encourage the assassination or even imply that we would be happy about the death of a leader, a political leader in our country. We cannot do it. Even though Ilhan Omar encourages terrorism and identifies with terrorism, even though there are people that are in part of our spiritual, are part of our nation's leadership that are absolutely reprehensible, it would be a disaster in the United States of America if we had the assassination of any leader. If it was Kamala Harris, if it was Ilhan Omar, if it was anybody that is a part of our political system, it would be an absolute disaster. It would be the worst thing that we have ever experienced in our country. We have seen the effects of political leaders being killed. We just watched the attempted assassination of Donald Trump happen for the second time. That is something that we cannot encourage. Now, I will all day applaud the assassination of leaders that are seeking to destroy human life. Okay? These are terrorists. These are terrorists. It's necessary what Israel is doing in order to preserve itself. And I'm not encouraging anybody to get assassinated by anybody. But what I'm saying is what Israel is doing is a necessity. Okay? It's a necessity. They have to do what they do. But we cannot. Even when it comes to these situations that are going on with our leaders here, We cannot encourage that in any way. We can't. We just can't. Like I cannot emphasize this enough. I know that there are comments in the chat where people are saying stuff like that. We are good. If there is a comment in the chat where somebody calls for the assassination or makes even a hint of that for any of our leaders here in the United States of America,
any kind of violence.
It's gone. Any violence at all, it's gone. We're taking you out of the chat. We cannot afford for that to happen in this country. We just can't.
Okay.
And by the way, that's the attitude of Israel. If Israel could have it their way, they would not kill anybody.
No, I'm going to say something on that regard. Okay. And again.
And by the way, Brad, you're an amazing brother. You're one of us. Brad's on my team. He's one of my researchers. Okay. He's somebody that I look up to, admire, respect, I love. He's a wonderful, dear brother. So I'm not trying to isolate anybody, but I had to do that because it came out in a super chat. But my point is this, it's like, we can't do that. We can't do it.
Okay. Why can't we do that?
In the United States of America, our nation is predicated upon the foundation of free speech. We should be allowed to say anything that we want. And let me just take it one step further, okay? The very moment we begin to encourage, get excited about, or get in the business of the assassination of a leader in our nation, then we become like the rest of the Middle East.
Exactly. So,
we become like these terrorists.
So the reason I'm asking the question, because I'm doing the Jewish thing, you know.
Yeah, of course.
I'm asking the question, but basically is this. The reason we cannot do that is because of what we need to be. Not regarding whether they deserve it or not, or agree or not. It's not about that. It's about who we are. It's not about who they are. And that differentiation is something that, I don't know if you know, but we have a moral code in Israel which is very clear about who and what you use your weapons against.
Yes, that's right.
And you know, you can't use your weapons. In this case, you can't. And there's a separation between combatants and civilians. And you're not allowed to use your weapons against civilians in case in strategic situations and everything like that. But the separation between combatants and civilians is not done because of the enemy. For instance, we know, according to Hamas and according to Hezbollah, that they don't separate combatants and civilians. The separation that needs to be done, the moral code that we need to adhere to, is for us, not for them. I don't know if I'm explaining this deeply. You have to understand that when you sin, you're not hurting the person you sinned against, you're hurting yourself first. And I think that is the basis of what we're talking about. You cannot allow yourself to go down that route because you need to be, truthful to God's ideals, mentality, God's will. And it's not because they don't deserve it sometimes. It's because you do not want to become that kind of person.
That's right.
You don't want to become that kind of civilization. You don't want to become that kind of entity. You don't want to become that kind of government. You don't want to become that kind of... So Israel actually puts huge amounts of effort into saving Palestinian lives, not because the Palestinians deserve it, because they are putting terror tunnels under their beds and RPGs in their children's, closets. It's because of who we want to be.
That's right. That's right. And I'm going to make myself very, 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 very clear. This is the heart of where things are at. It is just absolutely terrible. Like nobody should support action like this. This is not the type of thing that we make these joy assertions over. It's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So I think it's important that we understand that. And Israel does what it does because there is a necessity in order for it to be done. And the thing, and actually, I'll take it a step further, right? These terrorists who fully intended to take innocent life with them for the first time with this pager operation, it's not happening. It's a smart move.
It is a highly moral attack.
I would agree.
I know that sounds weird to say that. It's a highly moral attack. You can't, I think, for an enemy that hides among civilian population, you can't get a more moral attack than that. And that's something to say. But let's talk a little bit about the ramifications of this. We've given up an asset, meaning whoever had the ability to hack into those beepers or into the communication for the beepers had to have the ability to see the use, meaning it as a source of intelligence. We've given up a major source of intelligence.
I can I ask you this question, because your experience of this, and you actually did work in intelligence for a while, so you would know this. There's a certain point where the acquisition of a particular technology becomes such common practice, or so such a known tool, meaning it's old. It's something that's been around for a long time, that exposing it for what it is actually maximizes its effect. So think of it like this. Here's the issue. This pager technology is something guaranteed that's remarkably old. Okay? It's, when I say old, meaning the ability to be able to do this in pagers, don't ask me how I know this, by the way, is a very, very, very common. It's been around for a long time. Now, what's brilliant about this operation is the fact that they could bypass the circuitry that's hardwired into there to keep this type of explosion from taking place. That's where it's brilliant, right? That's where it's remarkable.
No, just to make it clear, nobody placed explosives in all of these pages.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's it.
Nobody plays these explosives.
It used the battery as the explosive.
It used the battery as the the explosive element. And I mean, again, genius, whoever put this together.
So understanding the way lithium polymers work, or lithium technology works, it's a very difficult thing to even understand how they could have done that. Because normally, to produce the kind of RF that would interfere to a point that would cause that battery to heat up and explode, you'd have to actually cause that battery to give it the energy to be able to do that. Well, that's a fine balance. Like how do you remove enough energy from the battery to actually cause the battery to explode, unless it's some hyper, like super. To me, it's past my ability to be able to understand. But what I think is really interesting, and I think is like really unique here, is if they're at the point where they're utilizing the tool to get it done, my guess is they already have way more sophisticated technology out there.
Well, there's something else that I think plays into this, and kind of thinking about, okay, somebody who has a pager anywhere in the world right now, okay? Or somebody has a cell phone anywhere in the world right now, has come to the realization that Israel's long arm, or somebody's long arm, I don't know if it was Israel, can reach you no matter where you are. Now, what I'm going to say is what this act was in reverse an act of terror. Because if you are a Hamas operative anywhere in the world, or a Hezbollah operative anywhere in the world, or somebody that Israel or whoever has this ability considers a bad guy anywhere in the world, you're not going to trust this ever again.
Oh, yeah.
You're never going to put this next to your ear ever again. You're never going to use a pager ever again. I mean, again, and this is, to a certain extent, a backwards terror attack.
Yeah.
Because it's not only what exploded, okay? You've put fear in the hearts of everybody who is on the receiving end of that, or might be on the receiving end of that forever again. It is terror. Now, one of the things that people don't really realize is that terror has to be based on the fact that you care, okay? Meaning you need something. You have to have something. When 9/11 happened, Osama bin Laden did not believe for a moment that the United States of America was going to cease to exist. But he said, I'm going to put fear in their hearts. And that fear is going to impact a lot of things that I want to impact it. Okay? Israel has put fear in the hearts of the enemy. Not only the Hezbollah, in the hearts of any enemy, because that hacking in can take place not connected to distance. That hacking in can take place from a satellite. that hacking in can take place
Anywhere.
And that is a, how do you say, a token or a symbol or a message to all of Israel's enemies, or whoever did it. I don't know if it was Israel. All of the enemies all over the world that this can happen.
I mean, bro, but you know the crazy part about this is they're not going to get the message. They're going to keep doing what they're going to try to keep doing.
Okay, so that brings us into a higher discussion. And do you want to go into the Houthim? Because let's open that.
Let's do that.
Because,
Let's talk about that, and then let's go back to northern Lebanon as well.
No.
Lebanon.
Let's talk about them not getting the message. Okay, Houthim, Hezbollah, and Hamas not getting the message. And I think we in the Western world don't really understand deep enough how this dynamic works. Okay, so here's the thing. 5 days ago, a siren goes off over my mom's house in Modi'in. So my mom goes into the bomb shelter. My brother runs up to the roof to see what's going on. Okay.
Yes. And actually, one of the pieces of the shrapnel hit something in Modi'in.
Yeah, so here's what happened. The Houthim in Yemen fired a long-range ballistic missile at Israel. It's got a longer range because it came in a different direction. And it literally was fired from Yemen, which means it didn't go over the Red Sea. It went over Saudi Arabia, it went over Jordan, and came down in Israel. I don't know if you know about how ballistic missiles work. They go ballistic, meaning they leave the atmosphere, they maneuver in the edge of space or outer space, and they come back in at a very, very high speed. Now, the Houthim called it a hypersonic ballistic missile. They said it's something new that they had tried. It came apart as it re-entered. I don't know if you know, but re-entry from space, I mean, that's how the Columbia, the space shuttle comes. You see the pictures of a spacecraft coming in and burning up. So these hypersonic ballistic missiles have to have heat shielding that shields them from coming back in. This probably fell apart already on the re-entry. So Israel's dealing with the remains of this torn about, meaning it wasn't really a target anymore. We fired both Arrow 2 missiles at it and then Iron Dome when it got on closer. But we fired not at the missile itself, but at fragments of the missile.
Oh, is that what was going on?
Exactly. And we hit the fragments, and some of
Why the fragments instead of the missile itself?
Because the missile had fallen apart. So we're not dealing with the missile. We're talking about the fragments.
Oh.
The missile had come apart in re-entry.
That makes sense. I didn't know that.
Missile had come apart in re-entry, but they were still afraid. I mean, even, a 500-pound piece of machinery coming in from the atmosphere is basically a high explosive when it hits the ground. So we're firing interceptors at the remains of the missile and blowing them up in the air. One of the remains literally fell in the escalator of the train station that I use in Modi'in.
Yeah.
Literally. I mean, I've walked up that train station many times. But here's the thing, okay? Most of it fell in open area. We believe that they were firing at the airport because the trajectory goes over Jordan, over Modi'in, and Modi'in is 10 minutes from the airport, 10-minute drive from the airport. So that could have been their target. But anyway, to make the long story short, it blew up on re-entry, and the Houthim saying, this is what we did. So that is the event. Israel is trying to say, okay, what happens if they fire 30 of those in one go? And again, this is the tit for tat with technology. The attempt on the Hezbollah, the explosions of the beepers, okay, is this, how does technology play in the modern war? And maybe this is part of what's happening. Let's go to what Israel's going to retaliate. And here's the thing. The only thing that they have in Yemen that is worth hitting are their ports. So the first thing that Yemen does after it fires the rockets, it starts professing to the world how much of a humanitarian crisis is going on in Yemen, how much people are starving in Yemen. So if Israel hits a port in Yemen, they're still just making the humanitarian crisis worse. Meaning, we're going to fire at you, then we're going to say, oh, look at us, don't hit us back because we're such poor people.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, that's exactly what they did.
That's right.
Israel will probably hit one of the ports in Yemen and basically make it very, very clear. But this brings us to the main dynamic of what's going on, and I think a lot of people don't really understand. Houthim fired a rocket and had their port half destroyed.
Yeah, that's right.
And they've still
They didn't
decided to fire again. Okay? Hamas attacked Israel, and half of Gaza is destroyed. And they're still saying, we're going to attack again. Hezbollah has lost 400 operatives, and after what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so the basic dynamic of if you attack us, we will attack you back and make you pay a higher price. The higher price that we are saying that you will pay is in lives, in infrastructure, in, how do you say, the well-being of your population. But if you don't care about your life, and you don't care about the infrastructure, and you don't care about the well-being of your population, the threat of hitting you back carries no weight. And I think this is what we have to kind of think about.
Okay, so because I'm going to interrupt you in this, because this is the point that you're bringing up is actually remarkable, and I would completely agree with you. But couldn't me and you make a reasonable argument that although this may be the general sentiment of the population of terrorists that exist in these regions, this may very well not be the sentiment of the actual leaders? The leaders are probably complete cowards.
Yeah. No, not probably, are.
They have no desire to die. They don't, although they're telling people, Allahu Akbar, and, kill yourself and all the, although they're telling that to people, they themselves don't believe it. Ismail Haniyeh, maybe, in that he rejoiced over his grandchildren dying. I mean, you have to be a pretty mentally ill person to do that.
No, you're not mentally ill. You have bought into a satanic
death
cult.
There is mental illness to that too. You have to be mentally ill.
Yeah.
There's no way. Look, buying into a satanic death cult makes you mentally ill.
Oh, okay.
I mean, he has to be sick. I cannot live with myself when my son or my daughters are injured.
Okay.
So to imagine where you rejoice that your children are dead.
Do we believe that godliness, faith can go viral? Meaning good things can feed upon themselves. I mean, anybody who's ever heard the word revival says, anybody who's grown up in the Calvary Chapel, that movie we saw. Okay, something started off in a little church in Costa Mesa, and that grew on itself, built on itself, and created a movement of godliness that actually spread out of that event.
But I think there's a conflation of terms that happens.
Let me finish that, because what I'm trying to say is, do you believe that the opposite can happen?
Yeah.
Something evil gets rooted in a certain place, time, and situation, and then in modern terms goes viral, okay, and grows on itself. I've been listening to a couple of right-wing people, and this is something maybe we'll talk about later, but basically that are saying the West does not understand the Muslim mindset, not only the Muslim mindset, the mindset of these jihadi ideas, because for instance, it turns out that something like 72% of the Gazans, the people in Gaza, are supporting Hamas in what they did. That means this is not just them as a terrorist organization. Somehow that ideology has infiltrated a whole area, a whole race, and they are accepting being part of that ideology. So if they're willing to die and they're willing for their lives to be horrific in the name of their ideology, if you threaten to kill them and you threaten to destroy their economy, the threat isn't going to work on them.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that we have to talk about here that are really important, because terminology matters here. And there is a dynamic conflation of terms that exists when we talk about two words, revival and spiritual awakening. Oftentimes people think that a revival is akin to a spiritual awakening, and they're two completely different things. The easiest way to describe these differences to people is to say a revival is associated with those that are born again. Okay? Revivals happen within the church. It happens to people that have already made the decision to receive the free gift of God in their lives. Revival takes place amongst Christians. That's a very important distinction to make. When non-believers come to know the Lord, that's what we refer to as a spiritual awakening. Now, there's a big difference between the two, okay? Because the imposition of your question with respect to good actions going viral, okay, can only be associated within a particular context, and the most common context that tends to be associated with is in the context of a revival, okay? Sometimes it can happen in a spiritual awakening, but the natural inclination that somebody has to propagate good actions is not something that is built into mankind. Mankind is born basically bad.
Okay.
So when you see the natural progression taking place for someone to do something good, it's a result of direct intervention of the Spirit of God. Men, on the other hand, are born with the propensity to do evil because they were born in darkness and in sin. So the idea that wickedness can go viral is a lot more probable than the idea that good can go viral.
Okay, and I want to use your description and say this, okay? We talk about a revival inside Christianity, inside the church, meaning the church is at a certain spiritual level.
Yeah.
And something happens that will upgrade, enlarge, spread out the positive spirituality of that inside the constraints or inside the root of the church itself.
100%.
Now, think about Islam. Islam, by definition, is a satanic-based environment.
It is.
Now, there are Muslims, all kinds of Muslims. Not all of the Muslims are the same. You've got Muslims in Saudi Arabia. You've got Muslims in this. You've got Muslims in Britain, okay? But just like a revival will upgrade the godliness of the church, a death cult or a jihadi,
yes, 100%.
will fanaticate. Is that a word? I don't even know. I mean, fanaticize. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the word is. Yeah. Okay, a satanic environment that was already in place and make it even worse. That's what happened in Hamas.
But terminology matters here.
Okay.
And I did this with Kaddis the other day in an interview that I had with him.
Well, let's finish off with what Kaddis, because Kaddis talked about this.
Yeah.
And what does Kaddis say?
Because
hit them with what hurts them.
Yeah. So this is my thought, because I shared this with Kaddis as well. I refuse to use the word fanatical. Okay? Because when these Muslims when these people do what they do, when Hamas does what it does, and when Hezbollah does what it does, it is not fanatical. Everybody needs to get that out of their mind. It's fundamental. Think of it like this.
Yeah, I got you.
Me and you are both biblical fundamentalists. We believe in the fundamentals of the Bible. If you are an Islamic fundamentalist, that means you believe in the fundamentals of the Quran, and the fundamentals of the Quran is the very document that fed the writing of what we see in Hamas's charter.
Yes.
I am not a fanatical person when I do these things, an Islamic fanaticist. I'm actually a fundamentalist.
Yeah, but not all the Muslims are.
But that's my point. Many of them are not, because they don't understand the core tenets or the core values of Islam, and as a result, they don't adhere to it or they don't practice it.
So here's the question. What is the difference between Muslims that live in Israel and the United States, among others, and the Muslims that live in downtown Gaza?
In many ways, there's not a lot of difference depending on how fundamental they become.
Well,
we have imams, for example, all over the United States of America that are calling for the same thing to happen here that have happened in Gaza.
But most of the Muslims are not being enticed by the more militant aspect. Okay, just like most Christians before a revival are accepting they're Christians, they go to church, okay? But something has to happen to upgrade their Christianity, to move them, to energize them, to make
this
them,
revival we're talking about.
Okay, that's a revival. The opposite of a revival is Muslims who are in a satanic cult by definition become motivated to do more.
Well, and again, the motivation to do more is a direct result of the instruction that they're being given. And the instruction that they're being given is what creates the culture that exists amongst them, which of course begins to change the tenets of of the core of their thoughts. Like, for example, if I'm a child and I'm raised up in Judea or Samaria, or I'm raised up as a Palestinian in Gaza, or I'm raised up in southern Lebanon, or I'm raised up in certain parts of Sudan, or I'm raised up in Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, if I'm raised up in Turkey, there's most Middle Eastern nations that are Islamic in nature will raise children up with the understanding that you are a hero if you end up giving your own life to take the lives of others, especially if those lives are Jewish lives or American lives, Jewish or Christian lives. And by the way, there's no difference between Christians and Americans in their mind. Christians are Americans, Americans are Christians. That's the way they
Jews are
that's the way they
Israelis,
think.
Israelis are Jews.
That's right. It's the way they think. And by the way, if you are a Zionist, okay, then you are just like a Jew to them. That's why you see people like Candace Owens who conflate the term Zionist with Jew, because in her mind, they both should be punished the same way.
Or that's why they fire rockets into Jaffa.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, knowing that most of the people living there are Muslims, because a Muslim that lives inside the Jewish state is as much their enemy as anybody else.
That's right. As a matter of fact, they're worse. They're infidels. They're beyond infidels, because they've been given the tenets and the foundation of Islamic literature. They've been given the raising in the Islamic culture, yet they've not been given to the ideals or the fundamentals of Islam, which makes them even worse. Especially when they participate in the morning prayers, especially when they're joining in the Ya ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, when they're doing all that stuff, it's part of their world.
So let's tie this back into what is Israel going to do now with the Houthis, for instance. I mean, what? We kill more of them? Doesn't matter. We take away their main port? It doesn't matter. What can be done to make people like this not want to fire rockets in Israel anymore?
If Saudi Arabia has anything to do with it, let me explain what would happen, okay? If Saudi Arabia had their way, what would end up happening is the United States would reinforce action and would punish anybody in the Red Sea or anywhere near that area, especially in Yemen, for doing any type of terrorist action. That's if, by the way, they just had a member of the royal family come out and make a statement like that. Hey, Joe Biden, you have not been strong enough in the Red Sea. Your attacks have not been strong enough. Shame on you. So if Saudi Arabia had it their way, then they would see an enforcer that was more recognized as a part of the international community that would not be condemned for their actions, do what they needed to do in the Red Sea to stifle the actions of the Houthis. The one thing that has to be understood about the Houthis is they're only as good as how you enable them. And the only way that you can enable the Houthis, you're not going to enable them in the northern portion of the Arabian Peninsula. As a matter of fact, they are mitigated. Even Oman holds their border very, very well.
Yeah.
So they're only going to be mitigated to what they do, not only in just Yemen, but they're also going to be mitigated to the bodies of water that border that area. So if we can secure the Red Sea, if you can secure the Gulf of Aden, if you can secure some of those areas, geographically speaking, then what you do is you mitigate, or mitigate's the appropriate term. You mitigate the amount of damage that the Houthis choose to do from within the context in which they do it. That's why Joe Biden was so heavily condemned by men like me and you when 4 years ago or 3 years ago, he decided to basically declare the Yemeni Houthis no longer as terrorist organization, which means we can't engage them as enemy combatants, which means they were allowed to run free to build the infrastructure that they built in order to do the destruction that they need to do. The way that you deal with the Yemeni Houthis is you destroy their capacity to be able to spread, and the moment you do that, you begin to ruin the sting that it has, and all they do is become a group of people that run their mouths but have no effect on anything that's happening.
But how do you answer the the dynamic of, wait a minute, but children are starving in Yemen. Wait a minute, but children are starving in Gaza. Wait a minute, but children are starving in Lebanon.
This, my opinion, you want to know how you answer that dynamic? And if any of the leaders in the countries that are around actually listen to me, this is what I would say. This is what I say. This is how you answer it, okay? No problem. You are complaining that the children are starving in these countries, so we're going to occupy those countries and start feeding these children.
Okay, here we go. And here's your interview with Kaddis, and more people in Israel, and even to a certain extent, me moving in the direction of, I'm not there yet, but the only way to deal with this is to hit them in what is sacred to them.
You have to.
Okay. And what is sacred to them, I don't know if you've ever heard the word waqf.
Yeah, waqf, of course. This is the guardianship of these sacred areas. And the very moment you go to attack those things, or the very moment you go to control those things, you create a problem. Listen, this word that you're bringing up, waqf, is the core of what's happening right now on the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
It's the big issue. And by the way, I want to make myself very, very clear here. MBS of Saudi Arabia recognizes already that the lies of Islam are becoming a bigger and bigger problem, because the researchers and the brainiacs that are sitting in Pakistan and that are sitting in India and that are sitting in some of these areas are coming out with literature that disprove the very existence of Muhammad and the Quran. And MBS is doing everything that he can to diversify the strength of Saudi Arabia as the known center of the Arab world, fully understanding that Islam will not be the thing that holds them together. That's why they're doing what they're doing. And that's why, by the way, they want badly to be able to manage or hold the title or carry Waqf in Jerusalem, because they know that when Jordan continues to carry it the way that they're carrying it, they're going to leave a certain element of subjectivity in the Temple Mount and bring problems in areas like Al-Aqsa or Haram al-Sharif because of the things that are happening. And you have the rise of people like Ben-Gvir, who are going on the Temple Mount saying we need to build a synagogue. Actually, there are Christians now that are praying on the Temple Mount with Jews with very little consequence. And it's causing the Arab world around to lose its mind, which is scaring the literal hell out of Mohammed bin Shalomeen. Why? Because he knows that the moment a war ensues over Jerusalem is the very moment he loses the ability to be able to get to G7 like he wants to.
Well, there's more. By the way, the word waqf doesn't only mean the Temple Mount.
Yes, of course. It's the guardianship of all sacred to Islam.
Exactly. But what's sacred to Islam? More than anything, it's land.
Of course.
And we're going back to here. And again, Kaddis has been pushing this very, very strongly. More and more people have been pushing
He's
it.
right, by the way, by pushing.
Okay. And saying the only way that you can hurt people who don't care about the lives of their children and don't care about the economy and don't care where the next meal is coming from is you take something away that they do care about, and that is land. And I'm thinking or kind of trying to embed that probably there might not be any choice to do this both in Gaza and in southern Lebanon. I know it sounds terrible because I went into southern Lebanon at the age of 19 hoping to set in place a pro-Israel or less militant or less anti-Israel situation in southern Lebanon, because southern Lebanon was being used to attack Israel way before this war, way before. And I'm talking about, I went into southern Lebanon in 1981. Okay, because 1981 is southern Lebanon is being used. And we actually went into southern Lebanon, held on to southern Lebanon for about for about 12 years. I was in southern Lebanon for 3.5 years before we pulled down. And every time Israel pulls out of an area, it becomes a hotbed for
hell.
It does. So to go back to where we're going, okay, we're going to have to make them pay in what they actually consider painful.
And Kaddis' idea, by the way, is brilliant. I fully agree with his take on that. You know, because for those of you that don't know, Kaddis is basically saying what should be done is every single day you have the hostages in your possession, we are gonna take away 30 square meters of Gaza. And by the way, they should also take that stand with Judea Samaria. They should do the same exact thing, because look, if I'm BB right now, okay, and I'm being told I'm going to have 3 generations of time to turn the sentiment of Israel around in the region, you know what I'm doing right away? I'm immediately taking away Gaza and Judea Samaria. It's a wrap. I'm immediately doing it. Why? Because by the time we get to generation number 3, those children's minds are not going to be brainwashed like the first generations.
Okay. So we're starting to understand a little bit of the complexities, but I still don't think that in the world we live in today, that's a possibility.
Well, and let me tell you why you think that way. You think that way because you understand the way the world works. Like it's unfortunate because there is to a certain degree, as badly as I would love to see that prescription being delved out, there's a certain degree of reality that you have to understand. The first thing is, like you said, it's not the way the world works. The second thing is, how do you get rid of Islamic fundamentalism? You live in a culture, in a world that doesn't allow you to speak freely and to reason with people. And if you're not going to do that in the Middle Eastern world, you're not going to change minds about Islam.
Reconquista.
Yeah, and if
you know the term?
Yes,
Reconquista.
That's right.
You know
that's
what that,
right. Yeah,
you know where that's from?
Yeah, it's a Spain. It's a term that comes out of Spain.
And it comes out of Spain. It means the reconquering of
Yeah.
Spain from
That's
the
right.
Arabs. Okay, that actually saved Europe from being a Muslim
Yeah.
entity.
Yeah, and what that involves is a massive effort to remove anything that controls the lives and the minds of people related to Islam. That's why they were so successful in Spain doing so. They were
No, it was hard and it was painful.
Yeah, but where it became effective was in the latter portion of that effort, when they began to realize that the more of an open door they gave for people to address the lies that were being communicated, that was brainwashing the generations that were still trying to hold fast to it, the faster they were able to deal with it. Now, what they got out of that was a deeply secular nation, and I get that, right? But and this is why I'm such a huge proponent of free speech, and this is why, like, I'm making such a big deal about why we cannot think about, taking people's lives and shutting their mouths, and like in this country, you can't do that. Because the more you open up a door for true discussion to be voiced, the greater of a chance you have of eliminating something that's bad.
So let's step up above this and go somewhere else, and let's see if I can kind of figure out what I'm trying to say. There's a new world order that is coming together. Until now, after World War II, the United States of America dominated the world.
Yep.
There was a Cold War with the Russians for a while, but in the end, the Russians lost. And ever since the end of the Cold War, the United States of America has been dominating the world. And it has done so more than anything by projecting naval power on all of the routes of trade.
Yeah, naval and nuclear. Sure.
Routes of trade.
Yep.
Okay.
That's right.
So meaning the United States of America had the time and the technology and the money to create the strongest, most capable military force in order to keep the naval routes open.
Yep.
And in order to, in order to threaten that ability, you had to be able to take on a carrier group. Okay, a carrier group was an aircraft carrier with probably about, 80, 90, 100 planes.
Yeah, that's not wrong.
And destroyers and submarines. You had to be able to take on a carrier group in order to stand up to America's military naval power. The problem is now you don't. And the Houthis have proved that you don't need to take on a carrier group. There has been a carrier group in the Gulf of Oman while all of this has been happening.
That's right.
The only thing that you need is, one, a rocket that can blow up a merchant ship, and they've sunk already 2 ships and they're hit a couple more, and 2, not to care about your population.
Yeah, 100%. That's not wrong. That is correct analysis.
Okay, so in this new world order, these people like the Houthis carry a punching power above and beyond their weight grade. What do you call it? Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, like in boxing, you got minor featherweight, and this, they punch much more than their featherweight.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's fair.
now something else is happening. the featherweights in in Yemen, and the featherweights in to a certain around Iran, and the relative featherweights in North Korea, and the midweights in China, and the midweights in Turkey, and the midweights in Russia are coming together because they realize that if they have big punching power more than this, they can take on the American hegemony, the American control. And that is the war that we are in right now. It's not only Israel and Gaza and the Houthis. It's not only Israel and by the way, Turkey's trying to get in on this. There is a feeling of the world that we can take on the American way of order, and we have the ability to push American down. Look at Kim Jong-il in North Korea. He's been sticking a middle finger up at the United States of America for decades, and nothing's happening. Okay, look at Iran. I mean, do you remember after the Iranian Revolution that they took how many hostages and held them for over a year?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and nothing's basically happening. I mean, the world, the featherweights in the world are realizing that we can punch, and whether we destroy the United States of America, it's enough for us to destroy, and they have no willingness to use their power.
Yeah, that's an accurate assessment.
Now, if that goes along, then the configuration, or the how do you say, the grouping of the midweights and the featherweights, Turkey, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and I'm even going to say, wait a minute, we haven't talked about something we haven't touched about. Okay, Venezuela.
Oh, so Venezuela is a buzzword because that buzzword reminds us of one of the major issues, and that becomes the very thing that you just talked about. The featherweights can get away with doing what they're doing with the heavyweight, predicated upon one fundamental issue. And this is the fundamental issue that I talk about all the time that nobody seems to want to acknowledge. And that is, we give the featherweights the ability to do what they can do and to do it effectively, so long as we are a nation that takes our eyes away from the true and living God. The very moment our commitment to the things of God becomes established the way that God intended for it to become established, we wouldn't let this stuff happen. And by the way, we wouldn't let this stuff happen because we're warmongers. It's going to go insert ourselves in every single a war that exists. No, we wouldn't let it happen because everybody understands the fact that America has a certain level of moral clarity that will create a situation that will prevent this type of insertion from happening. If you think about it, I got a big stick and I'm going to use it. Don't move. Whap. Okay, you ready for it again? Don't move. Whap. Pretty soon, they're not moving.
Do you know the Black Knight kind of story from Monty Python?
Oh, sure.
We all know.
Yeah.
I mean, just a recap, okay? Monty Python and their by the way, they were amazing. Did you ever see the part about the gender issue, sitting on the steps of the Temple Mount?
No.
I'll send that to you. But anyway,
I'd love to see that.
So King Arthur is riding along in Camelot, and like Monty Python, they do it, and he's got to cross a bridge, and there's a Black Knight that says, "You will not cross." And King Arthur says, "I'm going to cross." And said Black Knight says, "You're not going to cross." And they said, "Okay, let's fight." And they both pull out their swords, and King Arthur chops off his arm. And he says, "Oh, it's just a scratch. Okay, you will not cross." And then King Arthur chops off his second arm. And, he says, "Oh, it's just a scratch. You're not going to cross." And then he chops off his leg. And in the end, after chopping off 2 legs and 2 arms, he basically crosses. And then the Black Knight is yelling, "I still got the better of you. I still got the better of you." You have to be willing to chop off their arm, because otherwise they're not going to accept. And we live in a world where morally somebody is tying King Arthur's hand behind his back and saying, "Oh, don't hurt him. It's going to make him bleed.
Yeah.
He's not going to feel good. It's going to offend him. He's going to be, or even worse, his children are going to starve." And you're saying, if he'd have moved aside, there wouldn't have been a problem.
But
if
this
he
is-
hadn't attacked, there wouldn't have been a problem.
But David, this is the fundamental problem that we have with the way society is running today, especially in the United States of America. I talk about this oftentimes. When people don't walk with the Lord, then they don't use their heads when they come to the conclusions that they come to. Can I give you an example of this?
Yep.
One of the big issues that they're making a thing of with the borders is the cages that Barack Obama built. Because Barack Obama built those cages, right?
Not Trump.
Yeah, not Trump. But the statement is, we have separated these children from their parents. Okay, hold on for 1 second. Use your brain. I have been a police chaplain for 20 some odd years. I have walked into active police chaplain for 20 some odd years. I've been a police chaplain now for going on almost 30. But I have walked into hundreds and thousands of situations where a father and a mother chose to do something illegal.
They go to
And
jail.
based on their illegal behavior, their illegal actions, they were arrested. When they were arrested, either Child Protective Services came to get those children, or a family member that we could determine being stable in the current moment took custody of the children.
Which means you separated the children from their
They were
parents.
separated. Who did the separating? The police didn't do the separating. Child Protective Services didn't do the separating.
Okay.
Mom and dad did the separating when they chose to commit the crimes that they committed.
Okay, so if we're going to go down this path, let's talk about what is really happening. In a godly world, there is a connection between your actions and the result.
Sure.
Okay, if you do this, and God is very clear about this, you do this, this is going to happen to you, and in the higher sense of this, you sin, you're going to die.
That's right.
So there is a connection. If you separate godliness, you separate the connection between actions and results.
Yep.
And all you deal with is the result. Oh, I am going to be punished because I do this. Oh, the punishment isn't nice to me, and it's not fine. It doesn't feel good. And you disassociate the action from the punishment.
100%.
And
That's what abortion is all about.
Exactly. And all you deal with is the repercussions
Yep.
without dealing with the action. Now, that is so ungodly because God has said from day one, He said to Adam and Eve, this is your action, these are the repercussions. Okay? Now, we live in a world where, they would come to God and say, wait a minute, that's not nice what you're doing to them. You're going to kick them out of the garden. And God would say,
Right.
wait a minute, I told them not to do this.
Yeah.
And they said, it doesn't matter what you told them. They're going to be cold and they're going to have to work hard and they're going to have to deal with it. It's not fair.
Yep.
And that is the world. The separation between action and result is an ungodly separation. And here's the thing. Our enemies know that.
Of course they do.
Okay? The enemy knows that when we do that, we are not going to be upset with him because of his actions. We're going to only deal with the results of the action. So we're not going to be upset with Hamas for killing 1,200 Israelis and kidnapping. We're going to be upset with what happens as a result of that.
Yep. 100%.
And that disassociation is by definition ungodly.
Yep.
And if you are a godly person, I need you to understand that.
Yeah, you're going to understand, and you will understand it. You'll understand it significantly better. And that's the bigger issue. David, we could go on for another 45 minutes, but look at the time.
I haven't looked at it.
Your bride, I don't think your bride is here. Oh, no, we got plenty of time, actually. 1:30 is the limit, not 12:30.
1:30.
Oh, we got time. Okay, we can finish talking. I got paranoid for just a second. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 12:30. It's 1:30. We're good. Okay, we got plenty of time.
Okay. And I like the way that if you disconnect God out of your civil, out of your cultural, out of your legal, out of your moral, then you disconnect action and reaction or action and result. And that's what is allowed the enemy to be so strong.
Yeah. And this is, again, this goes back to the same tactics that the enemy has used from the very beginning. We've talked about this. Every single one of these conflicts, every single one of these situations, the lies, the media nonsense, all of the garbage that's going on is a direct result of everything that we're watching in the current moment. And none of this should be a surprise to anybody. None of this should be a surprise to anybody. It is exactly what it was intended to do, and it is what it was intended to be. And the farther away we get away from the Lord, the more we're going to embrace this nonsense.
And we're seeing, okay, and again, like everything down through the ages, Israel is the canary in the coal mine.
Yes.
We're in there. I mean, you're watching what's happening to Israel, and you're seeing a precursor. I don't know. You're seeing a trailer. Okay, here's a good word. You're seeing a trailer of the series that is actually coming down on us, and that is what I think most of the people need to understand.
And it's not wrong. Like what your assertion here is not wrong. It's completely correct.
The only problem is it's not a Netflix series. It is the real world.
I mean, but I think the foundational aspect of all of this is the thing that we have to stop for one moment to really reflect upon, because once that foundation is broken, then it's, I guess for lack of a better term, it's like anything goes, because you've lost the plumb line.
So to bring it down to the real world, does Israel press the button and blow up the last remaining port that the Houthis have in Yemen?
They have to.
And as a result
And
of that,
Saudi Arabia wants them to.
and of course Saudi Arabia wants us to be the bad guy. I mean, they could have done the same. I mean, they were at war with the Houthis for how long? And
Actually, Saudi Arabia can't do the same. And the reason why they can't do the same right now is because Russia's told them no, because of their relationship with Iran, and they can't use the Russian weapons that they've purchased from Russia to be able to do it. And even though Joe Biden has changed the designation of the Houthis as known terrorists, because of the way that the law was actually written with the reciprocal agreement that exists between them and the utilization of their weapons, Saudi Arabia can't use American weapons to stop what's happening.
Why can Saudi Arabia not and Israel can?
Because Israel actually has superseding capacity in the utilization of weapons that are provided to them by the United States of America, because they co-opted it. They worked on that technology together. So it's a 50-50 thing. So Israel can override, in the name of its defense, what America says in doing what they're going to do. Now, granted, there might be some supply consequences that come as a result, but Saudi Arabia just can't.
Do you want to hear something interesting that I kind of picked up on a little while ago?
Yeah.
Israel is the only country in the world that has its own maintenance facilities for F-35s.
Oh, yeah. And there's a reason for that, right?
Meaning we can the F-35 is Israel, the United States sophisticated stealth fighter. Yeah. Okay.
Our flagship is still the F-22. Most people don't know that.
But in order for the United States to keep the technology secret, there are certain aspects of maintenance, including the computers, including the software systems, that can be only done in the United States.
Yep.
You need to fly them here, do it in the United States. The only country in the world that can actually go in and change the actual core software of the F-35, and the only country that knows that there's no back door into the F-35 that can be controlled by the United States, is Israel.
Yep. And I think this should also be noted, the United States, this is a rumor. All I'm saying is a rumor. The United States has given up its ability to control via backdoor the F-35 in the case of Israel for two major reasons. Number one, there's technology that the F-35 has in it that was produced by Israel that nobody ever talks about, right? I'm not going to get into all the ins and outs of that.
Okay.
Number two, I have to be careful how I say this. Israel may or may not have close range proximity nuclear weapons attached to those F-35s. They may or may not have that. And the United States of America wants nothing to do with culpability in that.
Okay. I'm going to leave that on the side.
Yeah. Everyone's going to leave that on the side.
I'll touch something else that also makes sense. We realize, both with the F-22 and the F-35, that there are elements, not the actual planes, but there are components in both that have chips and, circuit boards. Oh, wow. That have chips and circuit boards.
More?
Yeah, some coffee.
Dale, can you? Thank you, brother.
That were...
Don't spit in it this time, Dale, okay?
Chips and circuit boards that were manufactured in either Taiwan or in China. which means you cannot be sure, just like we're finding out, let's say, with TikTok, or we're finding out with cameras and things that are made in China, you cannot be sure that there's not something in there that they have control over.
Yep.
So all of this is to put together. But here's back to the basic question. And maybe this is a question that I would like to ask. Because if Israel hits Yemen in the way that we need to hit Yemen for Yemen to stop targeting Israel, okay, a lot of innocent people, for lack of a better word, are going to die. Not only those who die in the hit, but children will starve in Yemen because the Yemeni government has decided to use their country as a platform to attack Israel. How do we deal with that?
Saudi Arabia.
No, Saudi Arabia is not going to hit him.
So, not for hitting him. Israel has to do what Israel has to do. But there has to be a reciprocal agreement, which, by the way, Saudi Arabia wants to make as a function of normalization to provide food for the Yemenis through their southern border.
So here's the thing. Israel's going to be the stick and Saudi Arabia is going to bring the carrot?
Very much so. Okay. That's the tactic. Okay. That's the tactic.
But what is the world going to blame? Who's the world going to blame?
Oh, of course the world's going to blame Israel. I mean, make no mistake about it. But the world also knows that by blaming Israel, they can remove themselves from any complicit action, while at the same time they know for a fact they have to do this, because if they don't, their largest trade route is disrupted.
Not only the trade route, there's more going on. And again, one of the things that Trump understood when he was in office was this change in the world dynamic, the world order, that America is going to lose its world order. And Trump has been building other, smaller local orders in order to stand against the loss of total world power and to have proxy power. Trump has been made a lot of effort in helping the Filipinos in the South China Sea, a lot of impact on Vietnam, South China Sea.
Yep.
By the way, I don't know if you know, but Japan has been arming itself like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this is the country that after World War II, by definition, did not, by their law, could not have an offensive army. It could not have an offensive military. And now Japan is on full, let's get offensive capabilities into place as quickly as possible. Everybody sees the coming war in that. Thank you, Dale. And so all of this is coming to a head. And what is happening is the Biden administration put a hold on creating a local NATO here in the Middle East, that Israel would have been the main part of it, and Iran is fighting against. They have pulled out their military power from the Eastern Pacific Ocean and moved it over. So basically there's this let's not make waves that America is moving into. That's going to be, I think, a problem. And again, it's like we've said before, it's all lining up to biblical prophecy that we see in the end.
Oh yeah, and the complexity associated with Japan arming itself in a way that's unprecedented lies solely in our mishandling of North Korea with anybody prior to Trump. Prior to Trump, the thought process with North Korea is multilateral action as opposed to some form of unilateral action, which Trump introduced when it came to his policy with North Korea. And that unilateralism actually is what moved Little Rocket Man to do what he did and actually change the environment that was happening. As a matter of fact, this is unique because the context of what was happening within the South China Sea was a direct result of Trump entering into a unilateral discussion with the leader of North Korea, because what that did in essence is it changed the position of South Korea. It also changed the position of China in how it handled its neighbor in the Pacific, Japan specifically. And what that ended up doing was it gave confidence to a lot of people in that arena as into the stability of the region. As a matter of fact, that's why Shinzo was assassinated, because his assassination was directly tied to the belief or to the idea that through a multilateral effort predicated upon Trump's initiation with a unilateral action with North Korea, they could stabilize the region. That had some huge effects for Hong Kong, which have been lost. It had huge effects for Taiwan, which are now lost. And now, as a result of the American leadership weakness, what's going on with Biden, what's happened with Kamala, the so-called red lines that he's drawn a million times, we now have China being aggressive in the South China Sea with the Philippines, because the Philippines are the easiest target to tackle, considering the fact that we have become absent in the Pacific. And by the way, the whole reason why we've become absent in the Pacific relates directly to the action between the Philippines and China in the South China Sea, which, by the way, international law is on the side of the Philippines. It's on the side of the international community. But China has been aggressively maneuvering in that area. Part of that is because of the dying support that exists within Xi Jinping. It's beginning to grow again. He's going to begin to get a little bit more support. Once that support gets to a point where it's strong enough, especially with sympathizers with the CCP, where things grow, you will see unilateral action taking place between China and Taiwan, and it's going to distract the rest of the world. So what you're talking about with Japan heavily arming itself was the direct result of the failure of that multilateral action taking place when American weakness showed its ugly face. And that American weakness has come from the United States of America basically saying, God, we're going to deny you and we have nothing to do with you. They all relate.
Okay, watch me trigger James.
Oh, don't do it.
And all of this, Venezuela.
Bro, where do we want to start? Everything South America that's happening right now is happening because of the model that we're seeing in there.
How far is Venezuela from the Panama Canal?
Well, theoretically, in the world that we live, not very far at all.
How far?
Let me look it up. I can tell you, it's. I mean, it's practically walking distance if you think about it.
Okay, so think about this: if the stupid little Houthi in the middle of nowhere can close off a main waterway by threatening shipping that's going through one of the main waterways that connect, Eastern and Western, what can Venezuela do with a couple of Scud missiles on the Panama Canal?
I'm going to get the exact distance. I'm telling you, it's like darn near walking distance. Like it's a nothing.
And other actors probably sitting in the world saying, wait a minute, if the Houthi can do this to the United States of America with a couple of long-range missiles, and kind of hold the world hostage. If Iran can, using proxies, hold the world hostage because they're sitting on major waterways, what can we as Venezuela do? Or other countries. I'm thinking about who else is going to stand up at some point and say, wait a minute, we're sitting next to 30% of the traffic, the merchant traffic of the trade that goes between the East and the West goes through the Panama Canal. And if you're sitting on the Panama Canal, what can you do?
Well, and the bigger problem is Caracas. That's the bigger problem, right? There's all kinds of estimates, by the way, in terms of the distance. It depends on where you're at, because if you know Venezuela, of course, the border, the northern border of Venezuela is the ocean, and that creates a lot of debatable conditions because it opens up. I mean, you're talking about the Caribbean. So the Caribbean, which, by the way, is viably open to any type of for lack of a better term, immersive action that would block something like that is pretty substantial. So by sea, the answer to that question is very subjective. But like you said, the capacity for them to make life miserable for the Panama Canal is substantial. The only advantage that you have right now is Salvador, right? El Salvador, that's where you can kind of change things with respect to central portion of the continent there. So anyway, to make a long story short, it's dangerous. And it's Venezuela is a triggering word for me for a lot of reasons, not just because of American policy and how it's shifting in a way that is becoming Venezuela on a whole bunch of levels, but on the international level with respect to the effectiveness of the Panama Canal, that is a substantial problem.
So anybody watching what's going on that is within mid-range rocket range of the Panama Canal, and that would be probably Nicaragua, if I remember correctly,
Yep.
Colombia, if I remember correctly, Venezuela, if I remember correctly, Panama, which is a half American state.
Yeah.
You've got this growing feeling that, okay, look at us. Nicaragua for me always means drug lords and Balagan.
Yeah.
Okay, Colombia has always meant drug lords and Balagan.
Yep.
And now we're giving these drug lords and Balagan a way to threaten world global trade
Oh yeah.
in a way that never before. The new world order is mixing up.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that you have to take into account, and it can be somewhat comforting to a degree, is Venezuela's ability to destroy or affect operations in the Panama is one thing, right? But the other thing is that would they ever do anything like that? And the answer to that is probably no, only because of the need for income that they produce with their oil. And that becomes a big deal because they are feeding a lot of oil, not only to the United States of America, and that's being done through operations in the Panama Canal, because they're not just going up to the East Coast, they're prominently going more to the West Coast, and their only access to the West Coast is through the Panama Canal, which is very important. The other thing is all of the people that they're servicing in the Pacific. And that's a very, very important aspect of what they do. They have no access to that if they don't have the Panama Canal.
Again, what I'm trying to say is this. The heavyweight boxers have given in to the medium weight and the lightweight or
That's
the
true.
featherweight.
So true.
So you don't even need to be a country. A drug lord with enough money in Colombia,
You're right.
which is close enough, sits in the jungle somewhere, fires off rockets at the Panama Canal, changes the situation in the world.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
he's got a power that he's never had before.
It's true.
And here is part of the problem. We're talking about the new world order is not going to be based on technology. It's going to be based on something else. And that's part of what we're seeing. And again, I don't know how this is going to play out, but the situation is right now in change. The last semblance of the old world order will be in place if President Trump takes the administration here in the next election. If he does not, the new world order with America actually pulling back into its borders for all kinds of reasons, and the result of that is probably going to start running out. And again, these are forerunners of things that we know are going to happen according to biblical prophecy.
One of your fellow countrymen, Yuval Harari, he basically said President Trump is the greatest threat to the New World Order in existence right now. He made that very clear. He said he cannot become president. If he becomes president, he will destroy the New World Order.
Okay.
Now, we know that not to be the truth because nobody's going to destroy the New World Order because God is going to use the New World Order to bring in the economy of the Antichrist. But he's going to substantially slow it down, if not keeping it from affecting the United States, at least for a short period of time.
And I want to mention another countryman, and again, we're going off topic here, okay, who is trying to convince us that aliens do exist.
Yeah.
Avi Leib, have you ever heard that name?
Yeah. Oh,
Do you
yeah.
know that he sat next to me in high school?
Did he really?
Literally, we sat
Man,
together
what
in
a
high
small world. How did
Literally,
he gain such...
he sat this close to
How
me in high
did
school.
he gain such a notoriety, man?
Well, he always...
How is it that the world just listens to him? It doesn't make sense. Same thing with Yuval.
First of all, he's a nerd.
Yeah.
I mean, he really was a nerd, though we played handball, and he had a really strong shot. But basically, he's very smart. He is very smart. But
No,
again,
no question there.
okay, how does any science fiction work? You take enough truth
Yeah.
from the existing technologies and spin it to a higher level.
Yeah.
Okay, and that, I mean, Star Trek. I mean, when you think about how does Star Trek work? I mean, from a physical point of view, it's crazy, but we're all buying into it. So put enough into it, and that's fun. But that's okay. That is the usage of half truth for entertainment. We know that Satan uses half truth for more than
Oh
entertainment.
my goodness, bro. And he's effective at his lies. He's the father of lies. And I think that's the thing. The core tenets of Islam is lies.
Yeah.
They say it in their own Quran. Allah is the chief of deceivers.
And but here's part of the problem, and I'm going to be talking about this a little bit more. Islam doesn't really need to lie that much. They are basically planning or accepting or building on the fact that we don't have the need or the ability to be aggressive. The Western world has loss of aggressiveness. I'll give you one example that maybe helps to explain this. When I finished my military service, I went into what you would call secret service training, and to be a, how do you say, bodyguards?
Yeah, and working as a diplomat.
No, not as a diplomat. I mean, Nothing that I did was diplomatic.
Before you started working with the diplomat's office, you had to get that kind of training because you were involved with protection of some of the
No,
diplomats,
I
right?
mean, I'm talking about security protection. Anybody who knows
Yeah.
anything about security, and we're talking about this with Trump. But we started studying Krav Maga. Krav Maga is Israel's.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that they did very correctly in the beginning, before you start studying Krav Maga, they have to teach you to be aggressive. We as part of our growing up, as part of our training, have a tendency to turn away from aggressiveness. We don't like to be aggressive. We will try not to be aggressive. So for about 2 weeks, they did all kinds of exercises that turned back on our aggressiveness.
Yeah.
Okay, because when you have a situation where your job is to guard or to save somebody, and you have to get there as quickly as possible, you cannot shun away from being aggressive. You have to automatically go into aggressive mode.
I agree.
Okay, so one of the things that we would do, okay, they would put a group of people in front of a doorway, and they say, you have to get through that doorway no matter what. There's somebody on the other side of that doorway, and there's a whole crowd of people that are standing in that doorway. What do? And you elbow, you bit, you kick. I actually climbed on shoulders of people in order to get through that doorway. You become totally aggressive. You have to be willing to be aggressive. We shun away from aggressiveness. The Western world has to go through that retraining again. And until we do that, the New World Order is going to be kind of come into place.
My goodness.
We've lost the will to use our
That's
God-given
really what
power.
it comes down to. That's really what it comes down to. Ugh.
What next?
Do we want to tackle the other elephant in the room, and that's what happens next in Lebanon?
I don't see any way that Israel is going to get away with not sending tanks back into southern Lebanon, meaning boots on the ground into different ways. And I hope they do it the right way. I mean, I don't know how to put it together, but actually entering southern Lebanon and actually holding the little gap between the Israeli border and the Litani River, and open up a map if you want to see what that is talking about, and at least holding that for some period of time until we can get the Hezbollah away from that.
Does Beirut support the action? Or
The people of Beirut are a non-player anymore. Hezbollah is actually set up in southern Lebanon, or in Lebanon on the whole. And again, we get to a point we can't really separate Hezbollah from Lebanon.
Yeah, I get it.
Just like we can't separate Hamas from Gaza.
Yeah.
Okay? They're so deeply embedded and they're so in control. It's like saying we could separate the Communist Party from China. You can't separate the Communist Party from China anymore. And if push comes to shove and we have to have a war with the People's Republic of China, and I'm going to hear people saying, okay,
We'd get our butts kicked.
well, we'll get to that. I'm not sure. But again,
America? We don't have enough to fight
no,
that
what I'm
war.
trying to say is this. You can't separate the People's Republic of China from the Communist Party anymore. Let's say the United States decides to go into North Korea. I mean, North Korea goes crazy, starts doing crazy stuff. You push the button, and there's going to be people who are saying, no, it's not all of the North Korean people.
Yeah.
It's the North Korean regime.
Yeah.
But you can't separate the regime from the people anymore. Just like you couldn't separate Germany from Nazism, just like you couldn't separate Imperial Japan, okay, from the ruling parties.
You can't even deal with that right now because there's people that are beginning to make Churchill look like an evil man. I mean, you're seeing that, right?
What are we going to do with the? Okay, you know what replacement theology is.
Oh yeah,
Okay, how about replacement history?
yeah. I mean, that's what you're doing.
That's exactly what he's doing.
You're replacing history. That's
Yeah,
right.
that's
You're making up
replacement
your
history.
own version of history.
Exactly. Just like people make up their own version of theology,
Yep.
what I think Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen is doing on the right side of the political ring is what I call replacement history.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and again, and you know what the next step is going to be? replacement morality, because history and theology have determined our morality.
Yeah, I would agree.
And if you replace the history and the theology, you can replace the morality, and we're going down a very dark road.
But I would argue that the replacement of the theology and the replacement of history has everything to do with the failure in morality before that. I think that when they turn their heart away from God, that's when they change history. That's when they begin to configure their own taste of morality, and that's what's going on. Okay, we've been doing this for 2 hours. Any final thoughts? Anything?
All eyes on Israel.
Yeah.
All eyes on Israel right now. There's this feeling that we are now in this quiet before the storm kind of situation.
I would agree.
Both on the south and the north, and in the whole realm of the Middle East, and as a whole result, a whole realm of the rest of the world.
Yeah.
There's this, nothing's happening at this moment, but it's on the edge of...
I also think there's a bigger problem brewing in Judea, Samaria that we haven't talked about. Maybe we'll talk about that next week.
Let's do that.
It's a big conversation.
Let's go into
it.
It's
a big conversation, especially because of the police force that the PA is building up.
Well,
that Israel's letting them build up.
It's more than that. One of the problems that people don't understand with the situation in Judea and Samaria, there's no border.
I know.
And if there's no border, there's only, think about, I don't know, I'm trying to give a good example. Think about the state of Texas that has Mexican towns interacting with American towns, and you've got a Mexican police and across the street an American police, and you've got this whole
there's no distinctions, no borders,
there's no real border, and that is part of the problem that we're having.
Yeah, it's so bad. It's so bad.
And there are crazies on our side too that are trying to push it.
Oh, the nutsos. I would agree. Okay, any final thoughts, bro?
Please go and vote. Please go and vote. I don't know how to say it. All the things that we've been talking about today, from an Israeli point of view, a world point of view, China, Venezuela, South America, all of them are going to be impacted by whoever sits in the White House at the end of this.
Yeah.
Please go and vote.
Yeah, I agree. And Golden Bear, to answer your question, I don't know. That's going to be one of my new projects coming up this week. She asks, when was the last time anybody saw Bashar al-Assad? I think that he has been generally hiding, not only because of Russia's position in Syria, but I also think that it relates to his wife having cancer and him actually being very close to his wife. I think there's some there. It's distracting him from doing what he normally does. That's why he's not the bitter, angry man that I've seen him be. But we haven't seen him in a long time.
I haven't seen him in a long time.
And I think that's at the request of Russia. I think that's a deal. Probably there's some multilateralism involved with Israel in that situation as well.
Okay. The main thing that I'm waiting to see is Nasrallah right now.
Oh yeah. I wonder if he was actually hit.
They say he wasn't. But until I see him on screen, I know it sounds weird to say, but I'm gonna hope that he has.
Yeah, that the pager got him. Yeah, boy, would that be crazy if that happened. Lebanon would be just got a lot easier.
Beep beep Nasrallah.
Yep. Beep beep. Oh gosh. Yeah, Ali Beeper.
I knew you would like that one.
I'm not done with that one, bro. I'm not. I think that's a crack up. Okay, let's pray. Father in heaven, we just thank you, Lord, for our time together, Lord. Indeed, you are so good, Lord, and we thank you for that goodness. And we pray, God, that with all these things that we've discussed, we put them in your hands, Lord. We know that the nation of Israel is in your hands, Lord, and we're trusting you for the nation. And we look to you, Lord. We thank you. We pray that you would go before us now in the conversation that we're having. Lord, that it would continue amongst the people that have watched, that it would be carried on into the lives of so many more, Lord, that we would get out there, that we would get involved, and that we would seek your purposes in doing it all. So, Lord, we love you and thank you. We look to you and we ask these things in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We love you guys. God bless you. Keep fighting the good fight.
See you next week.